Levi Tillemann joins us now. He is running in Colorado's 6th District, and he's got the Democratic Party running scared a little bit. He's been endorsed by Our Revolution and the Progressive Democrats of America, but definitely not by Steny Hoyer.
So I think that's fair to say.
That's right. So Steny Hoyer is the #2 Democrat in the House, right under Nancy Pelosi. And Levi, he came and talked to you about your race. You wound up recording it, and The Intercept ran an article about it that's gotten a lot of buzz. So first, before we get to why you decided to record it, for the folks who don't know, what did Steny tell you?
Well, Steny basically said, Congressman Hoyer said, that he knew better than the voters of the district what the right kind of candidate looked like to beat Mike Coffman. And to me, that was the thing that was most fundamentally offensive to democracy. I told him that we as Democrats need to fight for democracy with a small d, not just for the Democratic Party with a big D. And he said that that sounded very nice and academic, but kind of naive, and that the fact of the matter was, they had been shoveling money and resources and endorsements towards my Democratic opponent since before day one of the campaign, and that it would be best for the party if I just got out of the way and dropped out of the race.
So, Levi, for folks at home, that are not well-versed in the conventional wisdom of Democratic politics, they might be wondering, why does the Democratic Party care so much to push people out of the race? If they got a wonderful candidate and they've stocked him with a ton of money from their corporate donors, why don't they just have the race? Why do they have to push people out?
That's a really good question. I think there are two things. First of all, this is a progressive district. Bernie Sanders carried the district in 2016 by a substantial margin. And so they know that our message is going to resonate with Democratic voters. They also know that when I get elected, I'm not going to be beholden to their corporate donors. I'm not going to be beholden to the DCCC. And so I'll be able to fight for the causes that progressives care so much about. Medicare for all, a full transition to renewable energy, a living wage for working families, and free tuition for college for middle class and working class families.
Yeah, and if you haven't studied politics, that's obviously totally fine. It's not your job, but I have. And so I want to say two things about what's happening to Levi there, and it's happening to progressives across the country. First of all, the guy who corrupted Democratic politics in the first place, according to Ralph Nader and anyone who's ever studied it, was a guy named Tony Coelho, who convinced the rest of the Democratic Party to take corporate money after a couple of Supreme Court decisions that allowed it. And the mentor for Steny Hoyer was Tony Coelho. And so this virus has been in the Democratic Party since about 1978. And the idea is money is the only thing that matters. So they raise the corporate money for your opponent, and if they have to spend any of it fighting you in the primary, they feel like that's unacceptable. My God, I'm supposed to save all that money to fight the Republican so I could barely lose to him because he actually has more corporate money than I have. Yeah. Levi, why are you busting up that game?
Well, it's even worse than that because they're not honest about the process. What they do is they work behind the curtains to shovel money at a designated candidate. They then tell the people of the district that no one candidate is being favored. And this doesn't just refer to my race with my Democratic opponent. There were up to 7 people running or exploring in the 6th Congressional District over the course of this campaign. It's happening to dozens and dozens of progressive candidates across the country. And we decided in December that we had had enough. We had had enough of corrupt backroom dealers telling us one thing in private and then going out and doing another thing in public, telling us that they were going to be neutral in private and then working as hard as they could to undermine our campaign behind the scenes. And it is a corruption of our democratic process. Parties are welcome to have a role in picking who their candidate is, but if they're going to get into that game, then they sure as heck shouldn't lie about it.
So, Levi, Steny Hoyer and of course the establishment said you recording him was unacceptable, and It was a breach of ethics of some sort. So how do you feel about that?
Well, I know that the Democratic insiders in Washington, D.C. are mad that I pulled a fast one on Steny Hoyer. But you know what? They're trying to pull a fast one on the people of Colorado and on the voters of the 6th Congressional District. And that's where my loyalty lies. And they're cooperating with my Democratic opponent to do that. And to me, that's what's unacceptable. What's unacceptable is persistent lying and obfuscation that is aimed at misleading the voters of the 6th Congressional District where I live.
So, Levi, you are running in Democratic primary, obviously. You mentioned your opponents a couple of times there, and obviously Democratic Party supports them. I know no one that's watching here is naive enough to believe this, but I'll ask it anyway. Well, if the Democratic Party is supporting him, does that mean he's more progressive?
He's not. And one of the problems is there's a lot of progressive window dressing that we see in this race. I support Medicare for all. My opponent goes out and he says that he supports a pathway to universal health care. At the same time, he's taking money from PACs that are funded by health insurance companies and big pharmaceutical companies. And you and I know that saying that you support a path to universal health care effectively means nothing. It means it would be nice to get there someday, and we don't have a plan for what that looks like. And that's a huge problem. Now, the other thing that we hear a lot is that my opponent is going to be more electable. And in fact, Ben Ray Lujan, who is the head of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, which is the organization that is responsible for all of this subterfuge, actually went on NPR last Sunday and he told them that their polling shows that my competitor is far and away the only Democrat who can beat Mike Coffman in the Democratic primary. That sounded fishy to us. And so we called on them to release that polling. And we've called on them to release it again and again and again. And they have sidestepped those requests. And so we decided that we were going to run a poll on our own. And we're in the process of doing that right now. And I will make a promise to you right now, Cenk, that if that poll shows that my Democratic opponent is going to beat Mike Coffman much more handily than I could, and if it shows that we do not have a chance to make up that gap in the general election, then I will withdraw from this race the next day. That poll is going to come out on Monday. I will withdraw from the race on Tuesday. But I don't think that's what it's going to show. I think it's going to show that this district embraces the progressive policies, and my background is a clean energy entrepreneur and someone who has dedicated my life to public service. And if you'll have me, I would love to come on your show Monday and announce those results live.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, that is bold. I like that kind of bold action to say it ahead of time. That's right after my own heart there. So yeah, because what you're doing there, Levi, is exposing the myth that people in purple districts like corporate candidates better, that you could win over independents or Republicans in a general election if you take more corporate PAC money. And
that's right. And
that no poll has ever confirmed that.
We're also exposing the consistent obfuscations of my opponent, Jason Crow, and the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. They think that they can get away with lying because we don't have the resources to run our own poll and that we don't know. But you know what? We're going to invest those resources so we can know and so the American people will know. And we're going to shine a light on this dark corner of American democracy.
So one last thing for you guys, and let me just also note that you have a fascinating set of grandparents. Your grandmother, Nancy Dick, was Colorado's first female lieutenant governor, and your grandfather was Tom Lantos. Oh my God, I know Tom Lantos. He was not only a United States congressman and deeply progressive, but he was also an anti-Nazi resistance fighter in Hungary.
That's right.
So that's as badass as it gets. But my last question is about your policy framework for artificial intelligence. I have never seen that on a list of priorities, so I'm fascinated by that. What would be your framework? What should we do about AI?
Well, we have to develop that framework. And one of the things I did when I was at the Obama administration was I founded the first group at the Department of Energy that was looking at the implications of self-driving cars. I quickly realized that there was a whole universe of technologies that was going to be driven by a common family of sensors and machine learning algorithms that was going to transform our society. And it was going to have really significant implications. Some of those implications will be positive. We can expect many fewer traffic deaths as a result of autonomous vehicles. But there are about 2 million people employed in this country driving trucks. And if all of them lose their jobs to autonomous vehicles, that is going to be a huge problem. And so we need to figure out how we're going to ensure that the important work of communities and the important work of families gets done as more and more jobs are taken away from people and given to robots and computers. And that's something that I'm very qualified to do. I have progressive values. I'll come at this from a perspective that is going to benefit working Americans, not just people with money and power and capital.
All right, I want to give the websites for Levi here. LeviForColorado.com. Obviously, the slogan should be, "It's a good fit."
We actually looked at that one.
Okay, yeah, well, I'm here all week. He's not taking that corporate PAC money, so that's the link to donate there. The small dollar donations make all the difference, and so do volunteers. All the links will be down below, and it would be a good time to have someone with a family history of fighting Nazis. Unfortunately, we're right back in that soup these days.
It's a family tradition.
That's right. That's right. So Godspeed to you, Levi. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.